What Archer says here in Elizabeth's filing, he says, quote, "The defendant has filed for a bond motion in this case, or modification in this case. This court should deny the modification for several reasons. First, the defendant is facing multiple serious pending charges, multiple felony twos involving serious physical harm to her children, and thus is a flight risk and a potential risk to the victims in this case. Second, the defendant has filed a competency motion. Consequently, she is at personal risk until her competency is known. And here it is. Third, the defendant has new serious felony charges that will be considered by the grand jury."
Prosecutor William Archer filed a motion that basically said, "Not so fast, judge, keep her in." And you know what's wild? He didn't just oppose Elizabeth Ciders getting out of jail. He dropped something in that filing that changes everything.
If you guys follow cases, you are aware that investigations, they take time, and it sucks because I just can't imagine being the mother or the loved one of someone under, suspicious circumstances where they died and just not getting immediate answers. That's awful, but this is how they do their job. And also, I understand.
Actually, wait. Let me back up, because if you just as those cases where you have to understand what was already on the table before you can understand how explosive this new piece really is. The Ciders family, 16 children hidden inside a house on Ohm Street in Vinton County, Ohio. 16 kids ranging from 18 years old all the way down to 18 months. And the state already had them on child endangering charges, felony twos, serious physical harm, decades in prison if convicted. But here's where it gets interesting and honestly a little disturbing. The prosecutor wrote something that nobody's really talking about yet. Let me read you exactly what he said. And I want you to pay close attention to the third reason.
But moving on really quickly, I want to go to the Ciders family. That was interesting. So I was pulling some dockets on the Ohio House of Horrors. If you're listening right now, hopefully you're familiar with the case, because I have a whole playlist if you're not, so go catch up there. But all four of the Ciders, minus Gary Ciders Sr., they are still in jail, the Southeast Ohio Regional Jail, awaiting next steps here. Their case is with the grand jury because they did waive their preliminary hearing. Gary Ciders Sr. has been released on his own recognizance after capping out at a hospital. He was transferred to a hospital because he had some medical conditions that were not revealed because of HIPAA. I believe he has suffered from a stroke or two in the past, and that he is not fully there. However, I've said this, all four defendants are required to undergo a mental competency evaluation to determine whether or not they can stand trial. Now, Elizabeth and Christina Lynn Ciders, that's Gary Ciders Sr.'s wife and Gary Ciders Jr.'s mother, and Elizabeth Ciders' mother-in-law. Sorry, this is all a mouthful. Elizabeth and Christina have filed motions to lower their bonds so they can be released. And a judge has not ruled on that just yet. However, I'm pulling this up because it's interesting.
What? This court should deny the bond modification for several reasons. First, the defendant is facing multiple serious charges, multiple felony twos involving serious physical harm to her children, and thus is a flight risk and a potential risk to the victims in this case. Second, the defendant has filed a competency motion. Consequently, she is at personal risk until her competency is known. Third, the defendant has new serious felony charges that will be considered by the grand jury. Did you catch that? New serious felony charges, not possible charges. Not potential charges. New serious felony charges that will be considered by the grand jury. And here's the thing that really got me. When William Archer filed the exact same kind of opposition for Christina Ciders, Elizabeth's mother-in-law, he didn't mention new charges at all.
Gary Ciders does have a hearing in the public indecency charges that he faces. So, we'll see what happens there. But wow, it does sound like the William Archer and the Vinton County Prosecutor's Office, they are going for more than just child endangerment here. So I really hope, for the sake of those kids, there's nothing sexual. But I'll stay on top of that. Okay, also really quickly, Lindsay Clancy. I'm actually going to be at the trial starting on Wednesday, August 19th, covering that. So
Just the existing ones. Just the child endangering. So why does Elizabeth get that extra paragraph? Why is the prosecutor signaling that there's more coming for her, but not for grandma? Before we go deeper into what those charges could be and why this prosecutor is playing his cards so carefully, make sure you're subscribed to The Crime Case, because we follow the evidence, not the headlines.
the many people do not trust Mississippi law enforcement, but I think, just let the family say that. Let them deal with it. If they don't trust law enforcement, that's fine. But like everyone else, just stay out of it unless you have a direct experience, I guess.
And trust me, there's a lot.
The autopsy that the family did, that's undetermined. We know the state autopsy has concluded, but we don't have results because it has to go to a grand jury. But the family autopsy, undetermined because they are missing the hyoid bone, because that is still with the state as they do their investigation and present it to a grand jury. And also, the lungs were dissected. And so I think that made it a little bit more difficult to perform a private autopsy. But what they're doing is, or I believe they're doing, just based on my knowledge and experience, is they're doing further testing.
More evidence coming.
That's huge. And I say that because Christina Ciders, hers, the opposition motion does not say that. Hers just says that she's facing multiple serious pending charges, the same thing involving serious physical harm to her grandchildren, and she's a flight risk and a potential risk to the victims in the case. He also cites the competency motion, and therefore, the judge said deny the motion to lower the bond. So there is nothing there that she could be facing more serious felony charges. So I have a feeling this is just pertaining to Gary Ciders Jr. and Elizabeth Ciders. Gary Ciders Jr. did not file a motion to lower his bond, so I don't have anything there. And obviously Gary Ciders Sr., he's already been released ROR.
Here's what we know so far. All 4 adults were arrested when those 16 children were removed from that house on June 30th. Elizabeth and her husband Gary Jr. and his parents all charged. But Gary Sr., the grandfather, got released on his own recognizance because he's got serious medical issues. And I mean serious. The county was worried his medical bills would literally bankrupt them. That's how poor Vinton County is. One inmate's medical bills could have sent the county into a financial tailspin. So they let him out. But Elizabeth has been sitting in the Southeast Ohio Regional Jail for 2 months now. Her attorney, Tommy Stolle, asked the judge to lower her bond. Let her out, put a GPS bracelet on her. She has no money. She can't post bail anyway. And the prosecutor said absolutely not. And now we know why. Or at least part of why. You see, there's something beneath the surface here that nobody wants to talk about. Elizabeth's own lawyer filed a competency motion. That means even her defense team is questioning whether she's fit to stand trial. And the judge ordered a competency evaluation that will also determine whether she has a mental illness that would make her not guilty by reason of insanity. That's serious. That's not something you file lightly. And look, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a lawyer. But when you combine a competency motion with new serious felony charges that haven't even been indicted, yet you have to ask yourself, what does the prosecutor know that we don't?
These crime stories, you guys actually do want the truth. So again, that message was maybe for people who are new here. But yeah, it told me that you're not listening and you just, you want what you think, and that's it. So just to go back, she was stating certain things that Roger Mitchell was detailing about the family autopsy. Or
what did they find inside that house that goes beyond neglect? What did those children endure that the public hasn't heard about yet?
It's so insane. Him wearing 2 different shoes. I mean, it's wild to me. If you watch the trial, all of that has just been debunked through timelines. I'm sorry. It's just nuts.
Here's where it gets really dark. The prosecutor says the children are victims. 16 victims. And he's arguing that Elizabeth is a potential risk to those victims if she gets out. But the children are in therapeutic foster care. Their locations are supposed to be confidential. So, Why would the prosecutor be worried about her finding them unless he has reason to believe she would try? And you know what else? Her own lawyer says she wants to be reunited with her kids. She loves them. She's sending care packages from "Can I give this stuff to my children?" And the county is seeking permanent custody, not temporary. Permanent? That phrase is everything. Let me slow down for a second and just talk to you directly because this part matters. The state is not asking for temporary custody. That's what you request when you think there's a path back. When you think the parents might be able to get their act together. When you think the kids could go home eventually. But Vinton County is asking for permanent custody. Right from the start. And that tells you everything about what the prosecutors believe they have. And I need you to hear me on this. The state is not asking for temporary custody. That means they don't think reunification is in the children's best interest. Not now, not ever. That's the legal standard in Ohio. Best interest of the child. And the prosecutor is telling the judge those kids should never go back to that house. So what are the new charges? I wish I could tell you, but the prosecutor isn't saying. Not yet. But Ron O'Brien, a former prosecutor from Franklin County, Ohio, told us that the grand jury is likely going to hear this case before Labor Day. They have a 60-day clock from when the case was bound over. They're already past 40 days. And the prosecutor wants to present everything in one single indictment. All charges against all defendants. Which means whatever those new charges are, they're going to be revealed soon. And think about this. The prosecutor said those new charges are serious. Felonies, and they're specifically for Elizabeth, not for Grandma. So, what could she have done that her mother-in-law didn't? What happened inside that house that only she was responsible for? The prosecutor is showing his cards just enough to make us wonder, but not enough to satisfy us. That's intentional. That's strategy. You know, the one thing that keeps coming back to me is that booking video. The one from June 30th. Elizabeth was the only family member who wasn't handcuffed. And her body language was completely different from her husband and her in-laws. She cowered. Her shoulders were rounded. She was hunched over. She seemed scared, not defiant angry. Scared. And that made people wonder, was she a victim too? Her lawyer Tommy Stolley even said she didn't consider herself a victim, but he was looking into that possibility. Here's the thing though. The prosecutor doesn't care about that. He's not buying it. He called her a flight risk and a risk to the victims. He says she filed a competency motion, so she's at personal risk until that's resolved.
The mob, the internet, whoever, no matter what anyone hears, if they believe a certain theory about what happened to Nolan, they're not going to sway from that. So I'm under the impression at this point that a lot of people, they don't want the truth. They just want their own narrative. And so you can come at me, you can sit there in the comments and, tell me how nasty I am and that, and I'm, I don't really mean that, but, and I'm not exactly saying this audience, because I do feel like the audience that watches LA Magazine, watches all these.
And then there's that third reason, new serious felony charges. You know what I keep asking myself? If she's facing decades in prison already from the 16 counts of child endangering, what else could they possibly add that makes this worse? What charges are more serious than causing serious physical harm to your own children? The prosecutor said F2s, second-degree felonies. Those carry up to 8 years each. Multiply that by 16 and you're looking at well over 100 years. So what's left? What's more serious than that? And that's the question that keeps me up at night. Because whatever it is, it's bad enough that the prosecutor specifically mentioned it in writing. Bad enough that he let the public know it's coming. Bad enough that he's using it as a reason to keep her locked up before trial. So here's where I land on this. The Ciders case was already one of the most disturbing cases I've ever covered. 16 children hidden from the world. No school. No freedom. Locked in a small room for years. A pattern of neglect that went on and on and on.
The hyoid bone, by the way, if anybody is familiar with the Jeffrey Epstein, quote, suicide, one of the biggest problems with him taking his own life is that his hyoid bone was fractured. And if you talk to any pathologist, they will tell you that it is very difficult to fracture this bone on your own. They basically said, you need to be strangled by someone else, or it needs to be at the hands of someone else, or
Not one incident, a lifetime of abuse.
When I mentioned the red discoloration on the back of his neck, she mentioned that per the autopsy, it was surface. So it wasn't necessarily caused by injury because it was on the surface. And she even surmised that because, and this is just sad, because his body is in the decomp phase, it's not getting better, it's getting worse. So when your neck is propped up on this table, that could cause a mark.
And now we're finding out there might be more. What do you do when you're facing decades in prison and the state is coming for your children permanently? Do you wait for trial or do you find a way to disappear? The prosecutor is betting on the latter, and that's why Elizabeth Ciders is staying in jail. I want you to do something for me. Go to the Vinton County Common Pleas Court docket. Pull up the memorandum opposing bond modification. Read it yourself, and when you read that third reason, ask yourself what those new charges could be.
Really, it sounds like his lawyers were playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. Although, it was a lot of back and forth.
And then ask yourself why the prosecutor only mentioned them for Elizabeth and not for anyone else. Drop your theories in the comments.
As of Tuesday, August 18th, it has not been turned over to the DA's office, who are subsequently going to give it to the police for a thorough investigation. It's been with the family the whole time. There's been some kind of, discussion, dispute that the family says, well, we want our experts there at the same time, almost as a middleman here. And that's very clear because they do not trust Mississippi law enforcement. But I will say this does feel slightly odd. I think I saw a lawyer say it somewhere the other day, and it almost felt like gamesmanship. Like who is winning here? Who is, and that's not how investigations are really supposed to go, at least not in this phase or in this early stage, I guess.
I'm genuinely curious what you think because I've been going back and forth on this for days. And honestly, I don't have an answer. Not yet. But when that grand jury hands down that indictment, we're all going to find out together. If you want to follow this case as it unfolds, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications for the crime case. Because this isn't over. It hasn't even really started, and when those new charges drop, we'll be right here breaking it down for you.